What's up, everyone? I just want to talk to you a little bit this week about what I'm thinking about these messages that I'm putting here online, and that all of these messages are actually going to be on the internet forever, like as long as the internet lasts. So I'm going to take a short break from the series that we've been covering, and I'm going to actually go over a couple of things that I think that everybody needs to know about the Bible. And one of them is, well, you guessed it, how to read the Bible. Because we all know how it feels to read the Bible and say, I'm really going to study this really carefully, I'm really going to get into it, and you know what, this is going to be an amazing time where I'm just going to feel really close to God and it's going to be awesome, and then you end up either falling asleep or just turning on the Xbox, and it just ends up being something that's really boring, right? Now what if I told you that there is a way to read the Bible and to not make it boring? And you can make the Bible go from meh to wow, and it will blow your mind, hopefully. But I want to warn you, it's not the easiest thing to do, but it's also something that requires practice. But I think it's worth it, because the Bible is absolutely relevant to today. It's something that we need to read every day, and it's something that a lot of us just don't know how to read. The weirdest thing is that we've stopped educating people on how to read the Bible when it comes to the church. I don't know why, but somewhere along the line we just decided, hey, let's stop teaching people how to read the Bible, and we just started telling them what the Bible says. And I don't really understand that. If you take my education that I got from Moody Bible Institute, one of the most prestigious Bible schools in the world, and you took that very same education that I got and compared it to about 100 years ago, the same education that I got would be about the same as a junior in high school. I'm not even kidding you guys. People back then were taught Greek, they were taught Hebrew, they were taught how to memorize large blocks of information, they were taught everything. And the intensity of what I have learned at college is about the same as a high schooler. So that's what I want to do over the next couple of messages, is start teaching you guys how to read the Bible. So let's jump in with a quick example, okay? And it's from a lesson that I taught a few months ago, I think, and it's of Ruth and Boaz. And you guys know that the story of Ruth and Boaz is pretty straightforward. A woman loses her husband, then she moves, and then she meets another guy, falls for him, happily ever after. Boring story, right? No. One of the most important things that we need to do with this story is we need to look at it with the context of everything swirling around it. We need to look for clues, kind of like Sherlock Holmes, okay? One of the more important things of this story is the time frame. When did Ruth start harvesting in Boaz's fields? How long did she harvest from his crops? Think about it. How long did Ruth know Boaz? A week? 2 weeks? The Bible doesn't really make it all that clear until you get to Ruth 2:23. And it says, so Ruth stayed close to the women of Boaz to glean until the barley and wheat harvests were finished. Now I know you guys are probably looking at me and just being like, oh my gosh, this is so boring and I just wish we would stop. And you're thinking about turning it off right now, but I promise you this is important, okay? So stick with me, alright? When you guys look this up, what I'm asking you guys to do is to use the internet to your advantage, because it can really help you. How long was the barley and wheat harvest? Well, going online and doing a really quick Google search will show you that there were about 2 months in which the barley and wheat were harvested. Over these 2 months, people would go and harvest, and they would thresh all of the wheat and barley they could find, and then they would follow that up with a ripping party, because those two crops were basically the lifeblood of the Israelites for the following year. It was a huge deal for them, okay? Now, if you read a little bit before this part of the story, you can actually glean a few more things that Boaz did for Ruth. He had his servants drop grain behind them so she could pick it up. He fed her and protected her. He treated her with far more respect than the law required, and he also treated his workers fairly and with a lot of kindness. Now this is a big deal. Think about where Boaz is. He's moderately wealthy. He has nothing to gain from Ruth. He literally has everything in his life going for him, and yet he sees somebody who needs his help, and he helps them and expects nothing in return. This goes from a very typical story to a story about a man who cares for someone without expecting anything in return. It's a story about a woman who values godly character over family or wealth or comfort. This story really tells guys and girls everything they need to know about love and how to be loved romantically. I'm going to leave the rest of that for you to find, because now we're going to move on to a different story. Something a little bit meatier maybe. And this is a story about Cain and Abel. Now, the story about Cain and Abel is very early found in the Bible in Genesis. Cain and Abel are two brothers, and they both make an offering to God. God likes Abel's offering, but he does not like Cain's offering. And so then Cain ends up killing his brother in anger. Why did God favor Abel's offering and not Cain's? That's a tough question. Here's a tip for reading this story and for reading the Bible at large. Read and compare the translations and find the differences and the similarities in the version. For instance, look up the Holy Spirit in different translations, and you're going to find very different words to describe him in every translation of the Bible, and find out why that's so important. And then, on the other side, look for when all of the translations say the exact same thing, and then ask yourself, why is this so important? So in Genesis 4, 3 through 4, look at the NASB translation. That's the New American Standard Bible. So it came about in the course of time that Cain brought an offering to the Lord of the fruit of the ground. Abel, on his part, also brought the firstlings of his flock and of their fat portions. Moving on to the English Standard Version, we see it say, in the course of time, Cain brought to the Lord an offering of the fruit of the ground, and Abel also brought the firstborn of his flock and their fat portions. The New Revised Standard Version says, in the course of time, Cain brought the Lord an offering of the fruit of the ground, and Abel for his part of the firstlings of his flock, their fat portions. Now, again, this is really similar and pretty boring, right? But there's a few things I want to draw your attention to. First, Cain's offering is always listed first in all of the translations. Why? Because he was the oldest brother. He was prioritized in this story. Now, ask yourself this. What is different about the offerings between Cain and Abel? Cain's offering is fruit from the ground, and Abel's is the firstlings or firstborn of his flock. Now, some people think that this is an offering difference between fruit and livestock, but it's not. Both professions were valued equally. But really, it's about how the offering was given. Remember, Cain is offering fruit from the ground. Abel is offering firstborn of his flock. Abel is offering the very best of what he has. Cain is just giving him some of the latest harvest, just whatever he could find. Why does this matter? Well, it shows both of those men's hearts. Abel wanted to give God the very best that he had to offer. Cain just wanted to give God just a typical little bit of what he had. Clearly saved the best for himself and just gave God whatever he could find. We know in Deuteronomy that it tells us to give God the first fruits of our labor, which means give God the best of your efforts, and whether that is in school or a job or anything that we have to really work for, give the best of that to God. Why do we do that? Because that reminds us that God is worthy of the best of our efforts, not just the leftovers and whatever is convenient. It's the heart of what we give to God and not the amount or even what is being given. Are we giving God the best of our time and efforts? Are we really looking to God and saying, hey, you matter to me more than my comfort or to my convenience? Or are we just giving him leftovers in our life and saying, hey, God, I think I'll just give you this because, it's the least damaging to me. Hey, God, I think I'll do this because it's the least embarrassing for me. Hey, God, I think I'll give you this in my life because it just seems the easiest way to go. Are we treating God just like a box to be checked off? Something that we do on Wednesdays and Sundays? Because think about it. Right here, we see 3 different translations of the Bible using the same phrasing, and that's why it's important. Without the context, this story is really weird. It's just God looking at these 2 gifts and saying yes to one and nah to the other, which ultimately leads to Abel's death, and that kind of makes God responsible. It's like, dude, that's dark. But when we see in this story that Cain was already greedy, he was selfish, and he was easily angered, we see that God was trying to challenge Cain to grow beyond his weakness. Notice in the story that God did not reject Cain, he rejected Cain's offering. There was always more offerings that could have been made, and he allowed his anger to get the best of him. And then he ended up murdering his brother. See, finding these little similarities is actually bringing a lot to the story. So here's what I want you guys to do this week. I want you guys to look something up in the Bible, and then I want you to go and read a different translation and look at the differences and the similarities. You guys can do that with the Bible app. It's super easy. You can actually toggle between the translations as you read. And then do a quick Google search. Find the history behind what's going on. Find out who it's being written to, why this is being written, and then try to find where is the humanity behind it. The story of Ruth and Boaz is very easy to religiousifize and make into something where it's like, oh yes, Boaz was a holy man and Ruth was a holy woman and they were holy together, yay. But that's really not it. Try to find the humanity behind Boaz's actions. Try to find the humanity and the vulnerability behind Ruth. And then suddenly that story really comes to life. Now, I do need to offer you a warning. Some sources on the internet are not trustworthy. Whoa, go figure, right? If you are not sure, then send the link to either myself or one of your small group leaders, and then we can talk about it and make sure. Sadly, the internet is full of weirdos, and they try to take things like the Bible and make it say something totally different from what it's actually saying. But on a more serious note, guys, I really want you guys to do this. I think that a lot of us think that the Bible is just sort of a book that we read and it's kind of boring. But Proverbs 2:3-5 tells us that if we want to know more about God and this whole Christianity thing, then we need to start digging for it like treasure. Just imagine if I gave you a patch of land about the size of maybe like a backyard in a house, and I promised you that somewhere buried underneath the ground was a diamond worth $10 million. You would search for as long as you needed to find it, right? You wouldn't just dig for 5 minutes and go, this is boring, and leave. And that's the same as our relationship with God and the Bible. We have to realize that there is a world of knowledge and wisdom in there that we need to live life, and it's right there for us to look up. So read up, guys and gals. I love you guys, and I'll see you next week.